This is a video demo for my ADO.NET class project, and it's a Windows Form application for Eastside Theater Company. I've added two new forms to this, a View Venues form and an Update Photos to the Gallery form, and I'll show this one last. So right now let's go into the View Venues. The main thing that this does is you can click on a theater and it'll show all the columns of that row. For each theater you can see the different data. So first thing I'm going to demonstrate is how to add a new row. So I'm going to insert some data in here, change this, keep her as the owner, fake phone number, so I'm going to add her, and it tells me that it's been updated. And so if I go click on another theater and then click on this new theater that's been added, it shows me all the data, it saves it. The next thing I want to show is how to update a theater. So I'm going to change overlay. I'm going to change the name to OCC. I'm going to say update. It's going to tell me that it updated, and it's going to show that it was modified. So if I go to another theater, I click away, and then I go back, I can see that it's been modified. And then the next thing I want to show is how to delete. If I click on old theater and I say delete, it's going to tell me it's been deleted, and it's going to show up over here as deleted. In order to commit this to the database in SQL Server, you need to click Update Data Source, and it's going to tell me that it updated. And if I say Return Home, and I open this back up, you see that OCC was changed. It's OCC instead of Overlake. New theater has been added. It's in there, and you don't see old theater anymore. So we can see that that all worked. I'm going to exit this and show a little bit of the code behind all of this. So this is my middle tier, and this is a method that returns a data set that returns the venues. The first thing that I do is I declare a dataset object, and I use a SQL command here that's declared at the very top of this, and set the connection, the command type, and the select statement that's going to get all the rows from venues. And then I use a SQL data adapter called adapt venues, and I set its select command to this command venues here. And then I do something similar but with a SQL command called cmd delete venue, and I set the connection, and then I set the command text equal to a stored procedure called delete venue, which is in my SQL database. And then I set the delete command of the table adapter for venues equal to this SQL command. And then I use a SQL command builder, and I add a parameter that is adapt venues. This is going to enable me to update and delete and add into the database. And then at the very end, I fill the SQL data adapter with the data source, and I fill the venues table, and then I return dat venues. This method here is going to commit all the changes and anything that happened to the SQL Server database. It calls the update method and takes a data table of changes, which I'll capture in the code behind page, and it applies it to the SQL data adapter called adapt venues. So I go to the code behind page of the venues. I've set a middle tier object, a data set, and a data table. This is the data table that's going to capture all the changes. In my form load, I load the list, which is a method down here, and I also set the data set equal to return the venues. So the database middle tier object is calling return venues. And this method here gets the changed rows. It's setting the data table .changes equal to the data source .venues, and then going into that getting the table called venues, and then I'm getting all the changes, so the modified, added, and deleted rows. And then this load list method is pretty self-explanatory. I clear the list box first, and then I go through each row in the data set with the table of venues. I go through each row, and it grabs the row state and the name of the venue for each row. And then it also captures the changes. So each time the load list box method is called, it will know what changes have been made and it'll update the row state. This is the event that fires when you select a venue. It's capturing the selected index and using it as a parameter to select the row in the data source. So basically what's happening is I'm setting the text value of the text box control, and it's accessing the data source and then the venues table in the data source at the specific row, which is at the selected index, and it's selecting the venue ID column and placing it in the control. And that happens for each column in the database that has a text box on the form. The next thing is when you add a venue, this is what happens. It's adding a data row object and going into the dataset and then into the table and then adding a new row, and this is strongly typed here. And then it's adding whatever text values are in the controls and then adding that row into the table, and then it loads the list again to get all the changes. In much the same fashion, I'm updating the table with this update button, and it accesses the data source, the table, and then the selected row, and then the column, and it dumps the data from the text control into that column, and then when I load the list, it gets the changes and it knows that that specific row has been updated. And then this is the delete event, where when you click the delete button, it's going to access the data source, the table, and the specific row, and it's going to call a delete command, and it's going to call the SQL command that was in the middle tier to delete a row. Last but not least, in here, I have the update data source. This is going to update the SQL Server database. I call my middle tier method called update venues, and this right here is a data table, which I showed earlier is being updated with all the changes that happen every time one of those buttons is clicked and a change is made to the data source, and it's committing those changes to the SQL Server database. The last thing I want to show is I'm going to restart the program. This is a photo gallery for users after a tour is over to upload their photos. So you can scroll through photos that have been added, and then the main function here is you can add a photo, and so I'm going to add this one. They've already set, these are going to be columns in the database. There's a show name, year, and image column, along with a few others that I'll show in a minute. And so when I say save photo to gallery, it's going to say that it updated, and it's going to give me a preview of it here again. So I'm going to show the code that makes that happen. We're going to start in the middle tier. This is the method that inserts the image into the database, and it takes the image file name, a byte array, an image name, show name, and a year. It's setting pretty standard the connection here to opening it using connected architecture, and then this is my insert SQL statement that's going to insert the picture, and then I'm setting the parameters for each of the parameters up here, the input parameters, and then I execute non-query. And then this is a method that returns a data set to return the images in that table called image gallery. In much the same fashion, it connects to the database and calls this SQL query here, and then it uses a SQL data adapter, and it sets a select command equal to this command here, and then it fills that same SQL data adapter, it fills the dat photos. That's the data set, and this is the table in the data set that it's going to fill, and then it returns the data set. So using that in action, this is the code behind of the form I just showed. This is the middle tier object and the data source that's going to hold all the data. I load the list box and I call my return dataset images. I set that equal to the dataset, and then I go through to get the pictures in the image gallery, and I have a byte array, and I set the data source here, and I cast it to a byte array. I get the image gallery and then the image field, and then I set a memory stream, and I put the picture array in that, and then I set the picture box image property equal to the image.fromStream, and I put the memory stream right in there. And then this is going to bind the list box to the photos in the data set, and it's going to go through each photo in the data set and add it to the list box. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is just opening a file dialog to search for an image and setting the image property equal to image.fromFile. And then down here, when we save it, this is the event that fires when you say save picture. It uses a memory stream, same as up there, and it saves the picture in the raw format, and then I'm grabbing the text from the controls, and then I dump them right back into insert images into database. This is the method called from the middle tier. And then it's updating the list box with dat photos, where I return the data set. And the data source, it's setting the data source of the list box equal to the table called image gallery, and then the display member, so what I see is going to be the image name that was entered. And this is just updating once a picture has been added. And in much the same fashion as when I was updating venues and displaying them in the text box, this is going to give a preview of the selected picture name from the list box. It's going to get the selected index and display the image using a memory stream and a picture array. And that's about it for this project.